Could this really be what it seems? A clay jar? With the power to create electricity, you're standing in the dusty remnants of ancient Baghdad. Well, it wasn't called that yet. Not in 200 BCE, but you're deep in the heart of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. The ground beneath your feet hides secrets not just of kings and scribes, but of something even more mysterious: lost technology. The year is 1938. Workers are digging near the village of Kuyut Rabawa, just outside modern Baghdad. They expect pottery, maybe some coins, perhaps a few broken statues. What they don't expect is a riddle. A small clay jar about the size of a soda can, sealed with a cork and coated with a mysterious yellowish substance. Inside, a rolled copper cylinder. Within that, an iron rod. And everything shows signs of corrosion, as if something acidic once flowed inside. To most, it looks like a curiosity. But to a few, it sparks a theory so wild, it still shakes the academic world today. What if this wasn't just a container? What if it was a battery? Just imagine that. 2,000 years before Volta's pile. Before Faraday, before Edison, before Tesla. In a world of oil lamps and sundials, someone somehow might have been creating electricity. This is the truth they never taught you in school, the whispers say. They weren't supposed to have this technology. The object, later named the Baghdad Battery, ended up in the basement of the National Museum of Iraq. Few paid attention. But then came Wilhelm Koenig, a German archaeologist and curator. He looked at the artifact and didn't just see clay and metal. He saw potential. He saw function. He proposed something radical in the 1940s. The jar might have held an acidic liquid vinegar or lemon juice and could have been capable of producing a weak electric current. It had all the components: a copper conductor, an iron rod for the reaction, and an electrolyte to complete the circuit. That suggestion rippled like electricity itself through scholarly circles. But not everyone welcomed it. Historians have ignored this evidence for over a century, some claim. Because if true, it would force a dramatic rewrite of what ancient people were capable of. We're taught that electricity is a modern innovation, that the ancients relied on fire, water, muscle, and wind. But imagine if you held that jar in your hands, warm from the earth's grasp, and realized someone designed it. Not accidentally, not by mistake, but with intention, with knowledge. And this wasn't some freak object on its own. The area around Baghdad, once part of the Parthian Empire, was steeped in layers of technology: intricate glasswork, precise metallurgy, instruments for astronomy. Could it be? This civilization knew more than we thought. Let your mind wander for a moment. The streets of Seleucia in ancient Mesopotamia were bustling with traders, scholars, mystics. Strange machines hissed in hidden chambers. Alchemists murmured over scrolls of copper and gold. Priests raised their hands, not just in prayer, but in demonstration, lighting a faint spark from a sacred vessel. You see, every ancient culture preserved their power in symbols: the eye of Horus, the thunderbolt of Zeus, the shining halo of saints. But what if these weren't just metaphors for divine power? What if they were echoes of real physical energy? One jar, that's all it takes. One piece of the puzzle to shift everything. And yet, even today, many mainstream historians insist the Baghdad Battery was just a storage container, a mistake, a misunderstood artifact. There's no evidence of wires, no obvious devices it would power, they argue. So, it can't be a battery. But how much has been lost? Think of how fragile our understanding is. Libraries burned, tombs sealed, knowledge erased not by time but by war, conquest, and fear. In 2003, during the looting of the National Museum of Iraq, the original Baghdad Battery disappeared, possibly stolen, possibly destroyed, gone. But replicas were built. Scientists filled them with lemon juice and watched as small voltages danced across the terminals. It worked. Not enough to power a city, but enough to electroplate a ring or send a tingle through a hand. The question isn't whether it can generate electricity. The question is why it was built. Because in a world with no modern electronics, no known circuits, who would need a battery? Who could build one? And what else did they know? As it is written, "And the light of the heavens shall descend through stone." That ancient phrase now takes on new meaning. Because if the ancients could light a bulb even for a moment, then we must ask what powered their temples, their rituals, their myths. In this video, you're going to uncover the mystery of the Baghdad Battery, and beyond it, the entire lost science of ancient electricity. Gold-plated idols healing rituals, forgotten machines humming quietly beneath temple floors. All of it buried beneath centuries of disbelief. So keep listening, because the light is about to turn on. You're holding the jar now. In your hands, solid, cool rough at the edges. Ancient. Worn. But strangely, precise. As if it was never meant to just hold water or grain. The moment you lift the lid, you sense it. This was crafted for something else. Something intentional. Inside lies a copper cylinder rolled neatly hammered flat by hand, but formed with an elegance far beyond simple utility. In the center, an iron rod. At first, you assume it's just rusted, but when examined under magnification, scientists discovered something more curious: corrosion patterns that only form from chemical reactions. And not just any chemical reactions, electrochemical ones. Now let's look closer. This isn't random. Each material serves a purpose in a circuit. The copper and the iron separated by an electrolyte, a substance capable of carrying an electric charge when filled with vinegar or lemon juice. The same principles that power your flashlight or your phone. It's a galvanic cell in the language of modern science, but in the vocabulary of mystery, it's a whisper from the past we knew. The copper, the iron, and the acidic fluid together could generate between 0.5 and 1.0 volts of electricity. That may not sound like much, but it's enough to plate a thin layer of precious metal onto another object. It's enough to send a tingle into flesh. It's enough to make a symbol glow. But that's not all. Many replicas have been tested over the years. In the 1970s, an engineer named Willard Gray recreated the battery with grape juice and successfully electroplated a silver object with gold. Then, in the 1990s, Mythbusters repeated the test. Their verdict: it worked. The jars produced measurable electricity, just not enough to power anything large. But when connected in series, the voltage increased. You see, these weren't isolated jars. Some scholars suspect there may have been rows of these artifacts, dozens, hundreds. Imagine a temple chamber filled with clay pots wired humming quietly beneath the stone floor. A hidden grid, a sacred field, like a primitive electrical circuit embedded into ritual architecture. But why would ancient peoples do this? There are theories, many, some grounded in science, others straying into the realms of the esoteric. Let's start simple. Electroplating. The idea that ancient artisans used electricity to coat objects with precious metals, gold, silver, platinum. Normally, this process requires a power source and conductive solutions, just like a Baghdad battery. Could this explain the impossibly thin layers of gold on some Mesopotamian and Egyptian artifacts? The uniform shine, the microscopic smoothness. Mainstream scholars counter: no tools have been found, no electrolytic baths, no wires. But isn't that the point? If these rituals were sacred, wouldn't they be hidden? Protected, burned with the dead, or buried under temple foundations? Then there's another theory, one far stranger: electrotherapy. The idea that electricity was used for healing. The ancient Greeks wrote of electric fish torpedo rays that could numb pain. They believed electricity was a divine force, life-giving, magical. Could the priests of Mesopotamia have discovered a similar effect using these jars? Close your eyes. Imagine yourself in a dim temple chamber. Incense curling toward a painted ceiling. A priest dips his hand into a jar. You hear a snap, a tiny sound, and feel a sting, like touching a live wire. A jolt surges into your skin. You feel warmth, tingles, a glow, and then a voice chants words older than memory. In that moment you believe. You believe the gods are near, and maybe for a moment they are. Of course not everyone agrees. Historians still argue whether the jars were ever used in this way. Many dismiss the battery theory entirely. Coincidence, they say. Overinterpretation. Some suggest the jars were just storage for sacred scrolls. Others think they held papyrus wrapped around the metal to preserve religious writings. But if that were true, why the acid corrosion? Why the electrical configuration? And more importantly, why does the shape match almost exactly with early modern batteries? Too perfect, perhaps. Because the deeper you go, the more the pieces begin to align. Not just in Mesopotamia, but across time and space. From Egypt to Greece to the Indus Valley. But we'll come back to that. For now, let's return to the battery itself. One artifact, one mystery, and yet its design suggests memory. Someone remembered something. Some knowledge passed down not in textbooks, not in blueprints, but in symbols, rituals, craft. You see, in the ancient world, nothing was just what it seemed. A pot could be a portal, a tool, a transmitter, because the ancients didn't separate science from spirituality. Electricity, if they used it, was not just power. It was life force, sacred fire, the spark of the gods. Even today in languages like Arabic and Hebrew, the word for electricity is often linked with divine light. In Hebrew, hshml kazimel, a word also found in Ezekiel's vision of angelic beings surrounded by glowing radiance. Coincidence? Or continuity? Because maybe, just maybe, the Baghdad Battery isn't an outlier. Maybe it's a remnant, a relic of a deeper system we've barely begun to understand, one that hints at an ancient grasp of energy. Not energy as we know it now, plugged into sockets measured in kilowatts, but energy as experience, as sacred force, as transformation, and all of it sparked by a simple jar pulled from the earth. So ask yourself, if they had the knowledge to build a battery, what else did they know how to power? Now step deeper. The light is fading behind you, and the shadows ahead are older than memory. Imagine yourself in the inner sanctum of a Mesopotamian temple. Stone walls carved with winged bulls, lion-headed spirits, and spiraling symbols that no scholar has fully translated. A priest kneels before an altar. He holds a jar in his hand. The same shape, the same copper glint. A humming charge is building in the silence. Was this a ritual? The third theory surrounding the Baghdad Battery strays into a liminal space where science, myth, and sacred ceremony blur into one. A space few historians dare to explore, but one ancient people may have known intimately. What if the battery wasn't just for plating gold? What if it was part of a spiritual technology? In ancient Mesopotamia, temples were not mere places of worship. They were machines. Every corridor, every platform, every symbolic carving served a purpose not just symbolic, but functional. Just like in Egypt, where pyramids align with stars and chambers vibrate at frequencies, modern engineers still can't fully explain the ziggurats and inner sanctums of Mesopotamia may have been tuned to energy flows. And within that sacred machinery, the Baghdad Battery may have been a trigger, a device used to create physical sensations during rituals, a small jolt to the fingertips, a charge across gold-leafed altars, the sudden, unexpected spark that turned belief into awe. One theory even suggests that gold-plated idols, when connected to such a current, could subtly glow or vibrate, creating the illusion of divine presence. In a dark chamber, lit only by oil and imagination, the effect could be overwhelming. You wouldn't just see your god, you'd feel it. Still sound implausible. Consider this. The ancient Greeks spoke of oracles whose temples buzzed with divine electricity. In Delphi, a priestess would sit over a fissure releasing gases. Her voice changed, her body shivering. In Egypt, reliefs in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera depict what some interpret as electrical bulbs, giant oval objects with serpents and cables held by priests in ritual scenes. Mainstream scholars dismiss such ideas. Metaphor, they insist. Symbolism. There's no proof of actual electricity. But if you connect that image to the Baghdad Battery, a real object physically tested that produces real volts, suddenly the line between metaphor and mechanism begins to dissolve. It's important to remember, in the ancient world, knowledge wasn't shared through textbooks. It moved through ritual temple chant. It was encoded in architecture preserved in stone. The line between priest and scientist did not exist. So let's go back again. You're in the temple. The high priest speaks sacred names, names tied to stars, to frequencies, to hidden forces. Incense curls in golden smoke. The jars are arranged behind the altar. Small copper wires, perhaps braided with thin gold, run beneath the offering table. The idol before you, once dull, now shimmers. You reach out. Ooh, a spark dances across your fingertips. You gasp, not in pain but in revelation. The gods are watching. Now imagine this not once, but hundreds of times across centuries. In Babylon, in Nineveh, in Susa. Priests guarding secrets passed down through carved tablets and oral chants. Symbols etched into walls like musical scores of energy. Maybe these weren't just rituals. Maybe they were calibrations to align the body, the temple, and the cosmos. Remember that quote from Ezekiel? And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Religious or scientific? Both. Here's another fragment, this one from the ancient Zoroastrians of Persia. Close neighbors to Baghdad's ancestors. They believed in a sacred fire that was not only light, but energy. It had to be carefully maintained, nurtured, respected. It wasn't just symbolic. It lived. Was that fire metaphorical? Or was it something they actually tended, a current, a force, maybe even an arc of light? Now think about the battery again. What if the jars were never meant to power tools, but to power belief, to spark transformation within the human body and soul? This is the root of electrognosis, a term some fringe scholars now use to describe ancient interactions with electricity, not as a tool, but as a medium of divine connection. The tingling of fingertips, the pulse across skin. These were moments of awakening, realignment, the bridging of human and heavenly. Still, critics point out the lack of visual records. Where are the drawings of batteries? The blueprints. But sacred knowledge was rarely drawn plainly. Instead, it was embedded in stories, myths, stone patterns that echoed golden ratios, scrolls describing liquid fire, metallic light, and the hum of divinity. Some modern researchers believe even the Ark of the Covenant, described in excruciating technical detail in the Hebrew Bible, might have functioned as a type of capacitive energy storage device. Gold-lined, wooden core, 2 poles. Warnings of fatal shocks. Once again, myth and mechanism converge. Historians still argue whether the Baghdad Battery was truly functional or just an anomaly. But perhaps they're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real mystery isn't what did it do, but rather who knew it could. Because if the priests of Mesopotamia were using controlled electricity in ceremonies, that would make them the first known electro-spiritual engineers in history. And if that's true, then the story of science doesn't begin with the Enlightenment. It begins in candlelight, in whispers, in sacred jars hidden beneath temple stones. Now let your mind drift backward farther than Baghdad, beyond Mesopotamia, to other places, other relics, other signs that this wasn't an isolated spark, but a network of ancient light. You stand in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt. The walls are covered in carved stone reliefs, serpents coiled inside elongated ovals connected to mysterious boxes and cables. Ancient people walk beside them, arms outstretched as if operating a machine. To the modern eye, it seems odd. Why would priests carve such obscure shapes with such precision? Why would snakes float inside bulb-shaped containers? Some believe these images depict a symbolic creation myth. Gods of light, snakes of energy. But to others, it looks uncannily like a vacuum tube. Could this be another forgotten electrical device? Here the mystery grows wider. Remember, the Baghdad Battery has been replicated in the lab. It produces voltage. It works. But so do other ancient technologies when reinterpreted through modern eyes. There's the Dendera light bulb, as fringe theorists call it. A controversial figure, Erich von Däniken, made this image famous in the 1960s when he suggested ancient aliens might have brought electricity to early humans. That theory has been widely dismissed. But what if we remove the aliens and keep the question? What if ancient humans on their own rediscovered electricity? At the Great Pyramid of Giza, researchers have noted strange acoustic properties. Inner chambers vibrate at precise frequencies, resonant tones that align with Earth's own Schumann resonance. These are not accidental harmonics. Could it be that the ancients were experimenting with energy fields? Now tie this back to the battery. It may seem like a humble clay jar, but perhaps it was only one component of a broader system. Imagine this: Mesopotamian jars, Egyptian bulbs, pyramid harmonics, and sacred geometries across the ancient world. What if these weren't isolated symbols? What if they were nodes in a global network of lost science? Even in the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, thousands of miles from Baghdad, archaeologists found perfectly straight streets, underground drainage, and signs of vitrification stone exposed to intense heat. Could this have been caused by unknown energy technology? And in South America, at the site of Pumapunku in Bolivia, stone blocks are cut with such precision that modern engineers remain baffled. Circular drill holes, interlocking geometric shapes, high quartz content, ideal for energy manipulation. Again, mainstream historians explain this with ingenuity, time, and labor. But there's one recurring problem: no tools, no chisels, no saws, no blueprints. Just the result: perfect cuts, mysterious residues, and silence. Like the Baghdad Battery, these artifacts don't scream their secrets. They whisper them, softly, subtly. And those whispers keep repeating the same phrases. We knew about energy. We understood forces you have only just remembered. You are not the first. Back in Baghdad, something else emerges. Some researchers have noted that if the batteries were arranged in series connected end to end, they could produce higher voltage, enough to power simple chemical reactions, maybe even basic lighting, maybe enough to create sound. Sound. Yes, let's follow that thought. In ancient temples from Karnak to Chavin de Huantar in Peru, archaeologists have documented sound technology stone corridors that amplify the human voice pillars that resonate when struck, chambers that create infrasound frequencies you feel in your bones but cannot hear. If electricity and sound were used together like in modern electroacoustic devices, could the ancients have produced a form of sacred resonance? Imagine temple rituals where glowing idols vibrated in tune with chant, where jars like the Baghdad Battery amplified not just voltage, but vibration, where the human body was not just a participant, but a conductor. Remember, in Eastern philosophy, the body contains chakras, energetic centers aligned with sound frequencies. In Kabbalah, the Hebrew alphabet corresponds to energetic forms. In Vedic tradition, sound is the creator, the word, the Aum. It's all connected. Historians still argue whether the Baghdad Battery had any real purpose beyond the mundane. Some cling to the idea that it was used in medicine, others in magic, others still that it was a misunderstood mistake. But each time another artifact surfaces that shouldn't exist, another impossible cut, another unexplained residue, another symbol that echoes through time, the case grows stronger. This wasn't random. It was intentional. And more than that, it was sacred. The Baghdad Battery is not just a question mark in clay. It's a keystone, a signal, a reminder that ancient civilizations, those we so often dismiss as primitive, may have carried knowledge we can barely grasp. So ask yourself this: if they could generate electricity, if they could manipulate sound, if they could cut stone with unknown tools, then what did their world truly look like? And how much of it still lies buried beneath sand, beneath ash, beneath doubt? Because once you open the lid on this jar, you begin to hear the hum of forgotten science. So now we stand at the edge of the mystery. You've seen the jar held its strange geometry in your hands and felt the current of forgotten knowledge running just beneath its clay skin. But one question still pulses like a heartbeat beneath all this wonder. Where did the knowledge come from? Because the Baghdad Battery is not just a technological puzzle. It's a signal flare from a world we've barely begun to understand. And to truly appreciate what it means, we need to step back. Wider. Deeper. Let's revisit the time it likely emerged, the Parthian Empire between 250 BCE and 224 CE. A rich, complex era. Empires clashed, cultures merged. Babylonian wisdom mixed with Greek thought, Zoroastrian mysticism, and Eastern trade. But could this explosion of cultural alchemy have carried something even older? Many scholars believe so. Whispers from Sumer thousands of years before speak of divine decrees encoded with the essence of civilization itself. These weren't just laws or ethics. They were technologies, instruments, powers. Ancient tablets describe gods handing these to rulers, tablets of destiny, artifacts of creation. A language of function, not just belief. What if the Baghdad Battery was just one of them, not divine by nature, but divine by function? A way to shape the world. A vessel that stores energy the way a cup stores water. Practical magic. And now ask who gave them that. In every ancient culture, there is a moment obscured by myth when knowledge appears fully formed. Agriculture, astronomy, metalwork, mathematics. In Egypt, it was Thoth. In Mesopotamia, it was Enki. In Mesoamerica, it was Quetzalcoatl. Bearded gods, serpents of wisdom, carriers of strange devices and celestial charts. Could these figures have been real? Or more dangerously, could they have represented a forgotten civilization? One lost beneath floodfire or ice? Many have speculated about this. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Civilizations dismissed by modern academia, but preserved in story after story. Cultures described as advanced not just in art and governance, but in science, specifically energy science. And perhaps the Baghdad Battery is their fingerprint. A remnant passed from hand to hand, altered slightly by each generation until the deeper purpose was forgotten. But the shell remained. The form endured. A memory without understanding. That's not so far-fetched. We still build churches in the shape of cruciforms long after the rituals changed. We still echo architectural elements of Rome in our banks and capitals. So why wouldn't the shape of the battery remain, even if its true power faded from memory? But some argue a different theory, that instead of one lost super-civilization, there was a network of ancient knowledge bearers, isolated, yes, but occasionally connected, through trade, through dreams, through migration. In this theory, Mesopotamia didn't invent electricity. It rediscovered it. Briefly, just long enough to record a glimpse in clay and copper. Then it was lost again, hidden beneath conquest, stolen treasure, forgotten rights. And if that's the case, it means other jars may still be out there, other relics buried beneath deserts or jungles or seabeds, waiting. In fact, some believe they've already been found. In China, curious ceramic objects with similar layered metal structures have been unearthed, but dismissed as incense burners. In the Andes, strange metal rods encased in clay. In Egypt, residue of galvanic reactions inside sealed tomb items. No one dares call them batteries, not yet. But the evidence grows, and here's where it becomes truly fascinating. Because the more we look at ancient texts, the more they seem to describe a language of energy, sacred geometry, alchemical transformation, frequency, and vibration, over and over again across continents and centuries. Pythagoras spoke of the music of the sphere's celestial bodies vibrating in perfect harmony. Indian yogis mapped the body with chakras, each aligned to frequency light sound. Hebrew mystics traced energy through the tree of life, a blueprint of divine current flowing through creation. It's as if they all remembered something electrical, something sacred. And maybe the Baghdad Battery is just the stone tip of a lightning bolt that once ran through the ancient world, lighting temples, igniting minds, connecting humans to the forces of the universe. So what do we do with this knowledge? That's up to you. You can dismiss it. Say it was coincidence, a jar, nothing more. Or you can feel the quiet pulse behind the facts, the way the air hums just before a storm, and ask, what else have we missed? What lies beneath the museums, the libraries, the deserts? What machines have we buried in myth? And what might we still learn if we dare to listen, not just with logic, but with wonder? Because in the end, maybe the Baghdad Battery wasn't just about electricity. Maybe it was about remembering. A memory cast in clay charged by time, waiting for someone like you to pick it up, ask the right question, and spark the current once again. Let's slow down now. You're back in the quiet of your room. The jar is no longer in your hands, but its presence lingers, doesn't it? A soft buzz in the background of thought, a thread of mystery that refuses to fade. The Baghdad Battery was never just about volts or wires. It was about something deeper, a connection between the physical and the spiritual, between artifact and idea, between then and now. Because if ancient people really touched this force, if they coaxed lightning from clay, summoned light in stone chambers, and whispered sacred names into charged air, then we must ask what part of that story still lives in us. We've built towers of glass cities, of light machines that stretch across the sky. But maybe we're walking paths first, lit by forgotten jars and glowing idols echoing the dreams of civilizations who saw energy not as utility, but as communion. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, let your thoughts wander to temples pulsing with sound, to jars humming softly on golden altars, to the hands now dust that once kindled stars in darkness. And if you listen closely, maybe, just maybe, you'll hear it too. That soft electric sigh, the ancient current, still flowing,